Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is James and last night I was able to see the newest DCEU box office bomb, Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle tells the story of Jaime Reyes and his family, his Latino family, as they live in Plantera City, and how Jaime Reyes finds the Blue Beetle scarab and how the Cord Industries is coming after him and he must protect both himself, the scarab, but most of all his family. So Blue Beetle has had a very interesting history to say the least, especially with me. To give you a bit of a background for me on this character, I have always liked this character. I'm one of the few people that actually know who he is before they announced this movie. And so when they announced it, I was very intrigued, but I was a little less intrigued when they announced it'd be going straight to HBO Max. And so the fact that it got bumped up from HBO Max to theaters got me really excited. But as someone that has not been crazy about most comic book movies recently, all the trailers just look like the same comic book movie shit that we've been getting for the last 15 years. And so I was really worried walking into this film, just based off the marketing and the fact that they weren't marketing it, and that just doesn't give me much hope, and everything that they were marketing just didn't look very good to me. And I was shocked at how much I enjoyed this film walking out, where walking out of this movie, it falls more into the pleasant surprise category than mediocre category for me. With all that said, starting off with the positives, I think that the thing that makes this film stand out the most is the family element. Throughout the film, it's got a lot of cliches, which I'll get into later, but the thing that always makes it stand out is the family element, where it's all about family. I call this the Fast and Furious of the DCEU. This is a film that the primary theme about this is acceptance and family, and knowing that everyone's has something going on, and you get that from the first scene with the family. The family that Jaime Reyes is in is also very fun. They all have a moment to shine, whether that be dramatic moments, kind of fun moments. They all have a moment where you watch it and you just kind of get enjoyment out of it from the Nana, the abuela, who has a really great moment in the third act involving a minigun, which is in the trailers. The George Lopez is hilarious throughout the entire film. He's one of the standouts of the movie. And even you get characters like the dad, who's really insightful, and the mom, who's kind of classic mother, where she's very protective, but she knows when to let her son go out into the world. And then the sister, who's the classic grumpy, but also loves her family very much. Speaking about Jaime Reyes, Xolo Maridueña from Cobra Kai fame stars in this film. I have not personally seen Cobra Kai, so I can't say how good he is in that, but I really liked him in this. He's really good in this. I think that he gives a lot of, not necessarily depth, but undercurrents to his character. Of Jaime Reyes, he does a really good job with all the physical work. He feels a lot like Peter Parker in some ways, where he's getting these powers that he doesn't know how to use yet. And I think he does a really good job, and he instantly screams kind of movie star, where even though this film has been dealt a terrible hand with its marketing and where it's been placed and how it'll probably bomb, I really hope that we can get a follow-up to this in James Gunn's DCU, and we can get Xolo Maridueña back as Jaime Reyes. All of the action in this movie I thought was pretty solid. None of it is outstanding, but all of it's really good. There's three main action scenes throughout the entire film. There's one in the third act, there's one at about the hour and 15 minute mark, and then there's one at about the 40-minute mark. And so there's a lot. I thought all three action scenes were really well done. One of them is kind of more just robots fighting each other and lots of punching and throwing. And then the other one is a lot of shooting and dodging and The last one is a lot of like close-up combat, close hand combat, and then it goes into like flying stuff. I thought all three of them were very different. They stood out from each other, and they're all very shot very well. Going into the action, I think that the CGI is actually pretty decent for the most part. It's a film that uses the powers of Blue Beetle in a very fun way, where you get to see everything that's on display. It's in wide shots, it's not quick cuts. And so it's a lot of fun watching the action, and that's something that I was walking out expecting to be a negative for me. I thought the look of the Blue Beetle costume, the Blue Beetle suit, was actually really cool. It's got a lot of, the first time you see it shown in the trailers, it's got a very body horror vibe to it, where it looks just excruciatingly painful to go through that process of you transforming into this suit, and it looks great. A lot of it is practical and a lot of it is digital. I think it's got a great mix. I think everything that's done practically looks great. And even the stuff that I usually would point out as that's obviously digital, there's not a lot of that. Like, there's a lot of stuff that is digital. Don't say I'm not saying that. But there's a lot of stuff that's digital. But it's also a movie where it's like you can't really tell what parts of the suit are and aren't digital. The suit, when it's practical, looks great, and even when it's digital, it looks pretty good. And my final big positive for this film is that it's a movie that doesn't spend a lot of time trying to build a bigger universe. It's very much so kind of a love story to the Blue Beetle characters, because there are multiple Blue Beetles in the comics. Previous to Jaime Reyes, this isn't a spoiler, in the comics, there was two more, I'm pretty sure two more Blue Beetles before him. There was Ted Kord and some other guy. And so this film is very much so makes it clear that Ted Kord, and that there have been other Blue Beetles before him, and there are other people like that have had these powers, and the Scarab has attached to themselves before him. And it's very much so a love letter to the lore of Blue Beetle. And the thing that I really liked about this film was it's not trying to build a bigger universe. It's not trying to build a sequel where it's a prequel and then a spin-off show. No, it's just trying to do like a really solid comic book movie. And it's not trying to blow you out of the water with it. You know, a lot of people criticized The Flash because everyone thought it was going too big, or everyone was hyping it up too much, and so a lot of people didn't like that movie. I personally loved it, but that's a fair opinion. This movie, they're not trying to market it as one of the greatest comic book movies of all time, because it's nowhere close, but it's a really great movie because it's got a lot of it's not trying to build a universe. There's no cameos in this movie, so if you're expecting to see Batman show up, you're not going to. There's barely any references to like any of the DC. There's one reference to Superman, there's one reference to Batman, and apart from that, there's nothing. It's not trying to build a bigger universe. It's not trying to build anything out. It's just trying to maybe do a trilogy with this character and then move on. And I really appreciate that when it feels like all these comic book movies are trying to build towards something much bigger, and it's good to see a movie that isn't trying to do that for once. Moving on to the mixed aspects, there's a lot of cliches in here and there's a lot of tropes. This is by no means an original comic book film. There's a lot of things in this film that have been seen before, like an Iron Man and an Ant-Man. You've got a villain that has a very similar fighting style and a very similar power type to Blue Beetle. Very much so like Iron Man, very much so like Ant-Man. You've got the evil corporation and then kind of the underdog beating them. That's like Ant-Man. It's very similar to a lot of comic book movies, and so this is going to be something that it didn't bug me too much. I actually liked that it was trying to go smaller, and I think we've been doing this. They've been making comic book movies like this for well over a decade or two. We're eventually going to start running into tropes. We're eventually going to start running into things that are kind of being recycled. And so I personally didn't mind that there was a lot of tropes. I can see how, but I can definitely see how it's going to bug a lot of people. And from that, I'm going to move on to the negatives. And the main negative that I have is the villains. Both of the villains in this film are incredibly generic and forgettable. To the point where I can't even remember their names. You've got the lady from Thelma and Louise playing the main villain of Cord. And she's very much so like Trask. And she's very much so like Obadiah Stane from Iron Man. She's very much so like the main villain from Ant-Man. She's forgettable. Like, she's just a power-hungry billionaire who wants to run a company, and then there's people trying to take her down. And I think you could tell in her acting that she didn't really think she was given much to work with. And so she's easily one of the most forgettable comic movie villains of the last 5 to 10 years for me. Now, the other villain is nowhere near as forgettable. He actually has stuff to do in the movie. He's in a lot of it. He's doing a lot of things physically. He's fighting Blue Beetle. He's always really in the scene somewhere. Especially when it's the Cord scenes, you've got him given a little bit of a backstory, just a little bit, that kind of makes you a bit sympathetic towards him. So they try and give him a little bit more to do, but what they give him still isn't very much. It's still very generic. It's still incredibly forgettable. Once again, I can't remember his name. The only thing that makes him stand out a little bit more is that he has more to do and he's a bigger physical threat to Blue Beetle. And my one other main positive is the first 30 to 40 minutes of this movie is not very good. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's very much so feels like a CW show for the first 30-ish minutes. You get the Blue Beetle. It attaches to Jaime around the 30-minute mark, and that's when it starts to get better. But it just kind of feels like it's really slow. It doesn't feel like it's working very well, which ties into another problem that the first action sequence isn't until over 45 minutes into the film, and it's only a 2-hour movie. And so I think they should have cut a bit out of the first, 30 minutes, maybe like 30, 35, 40 minutes, cut maybe 10 minutes out. I think you could have had a really even better movie than this film already was. But with all that said, I really enjoyed this movie. This film was an absolute blast. It's one of the bigger surprises of the year. And I really hope that it can be successful enough, maybe break even, maybe make a bit of a profit. I really hope that people give this film a chance and James Gunn sees the love that people that did see it have for it, and I really hope this film gets a sequel in James Gunn's DCU. So if you are a fan of the Blue Beetle character or the lore or DC or comic book movies in general, and you want a just fun, like somewhat generic, but just easily accessible, solid comic book movie, I think Blue Beetle is definitely the film for you. So I actually would say go check this movie out in theaters. And then when it comes home, I would say to buy it. Well, that was my thoughts on Blue Beetle. If you've seen the movie, which not many people have probably, please let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. I'd be very curious to see what you thought of it, just the generic elements, pull it back for you. I don't know. Tell me what you thought about it below in the comments. And as always, I'll see you on the next one. Bye.